David Davis was Brexit Secretary for 2 years, promising Britain no downside to leaving the EU and that a future deal would give us the exact same benefits before his dramatic resignation over Theresa May's compromise Chequers plan in July. So what's he going to do next? Well, he's with me now. Mr. Davis, if the Chequers plan, and the Prime Minister thinks she can get a deal on the basis of it, if that comes back to the House of Commons as the basis of a deal, will you vote for it or against it?
I'll vote against it. It would be rather odd for me to resign over something and then vote for it when it came back. In my view, the Chequers proposal, it's not a deal, we shouldn't call it a Chequers deal, it's the Chequers proposal, is actually almost worse than being in. I mean, we will be under the rule of the European Union with respect to all of our manufactured goods and agri-foods. That's a really serious concession. What about take back control? Doesn't work. That actually leaves us in a position where they dictate our future rules without us having a say at all. So it's a worse deal.
If you're going to vote against it, and that's even if there are no further compromises, even if it's as it stands now, if you all vote against it, chances are she won't get it through the House of Commons.
Yeah.
Now, if that's the case, can she possibly stay on as Prime Minister?
Oh yes. I mean, I've listened to your press coverage, as it were, this morning, and the newspapers love to focus on the personality and so on. The centre of this, I mean, I don't know what Boris wants to do. The truth about this
yes, you do.
No,
we all know what Boris
we know what he wants to do. I don't know what he's planning to do. The simple truth is that the most important issue. You started out earlier this morning saying this is the most important issue.
Sure
it's going to affect us for a generation and more. And we should be focusing on the realities of it. Can I just come back to one thing you said? You said if she gets it. The other argument I made at that Chequers cabinet was this won't be the last step. You know, they will not accept
this. So you think, she said this morning there won't be more compromises.
Well, except in the national interest. I mean, your commentators earlier were exactly right. That is an incredible sort of open sesame to all. You know, you're not going to turn around. Yes. You're not going to come to the House of Commons and say, "Oh, I agreed this, but that wasn't in the national interest," are you?
I suppose what she would say is the trouble is, David, that your proposal, what you called on this very chair, Canada plus, wouldn't work either because it does not resolve the border problem in Northern Ireland. It would break the Belfast Agreement, and there really isn't a way around
Well, two things. I mean, firstly, it's still possible. Tusk talked about a free trade deal a long time ago now. I think it's a year ago, but certainly early on in this process. Secondly, I do think, I mean, I'm free to talk more freely now than perhaps when I was a minister. I do think I do think we've heavily overemphasised the problem on the Northern Ireland border. Northern Ireland border is a border already. It's got a VAT border, it's got an excise border, it's got a customs, it's got a security border, and it works perfectly well with careful cooperation between both sides. The only thing that will be added, if we've got a tariff-free agreement, which is what we're after, the only thing that will be added is rules of origin of goods coming into Northern Ireland that might go into the south. We can control that. There are only 6 ports in Northern Ireland. This is a much more straightforward issue to deal with if we choose to, if we put the political will behind it. We and the Irish Republic, the two together.
Coming back to the politics of all of this and the House of Commons, if she brings back a deal that is voted down, I've got yourself and many others, Nick Boles now on the other side, so it looks like the numbers are turning against her. Yeah. If that happens, you've been a supporter of Brexit for a very long time, you might lose the whole thing, you might lose the prize, because at that point the House of Commons might very well ask for an extension to Article 50, and on we go, month after month, year after year.
It may ask for it, but you've got to assume there are other alternatives. I mean, you're quite right, you pointed out. Nick Boles, a good man, but a very, very firm Remainer, wants another alternative. He now accepts that this is worse than the existing deal. Her own Chief of Staff, Nick Timothy, this week said, we don't want Chequers. It's the wrong thing. It's not good enough. So we've got to turn around with other alternatives. There are a couple of other alternatives. There's the World Trade Organization deal. We have seen a summer of disgraceful Project Fear Mark III about that. But so that's doable too. But also, as I said, what we actually we made up the phrase on this programme, Canada plus, but free trade plus is a better way of putting it. That's still available. My old department has been working on a fallback plan on that for some time. Yes, why not? It's based entirely on proposals, actions that the European Union's taken before, whether it's with Canada or South Korea or Japan or New Zealand or Australia. All of these deals exist already, so it's all precedent-based.
What a lot of your critics would say is David Davis is always breezy and optimistic. He's always telling us it's going to be fantastic, it's going to be wonderful. I mean, you can't really say now that we get the exact same benefits.
Yeah, what I've also said over and over again, particularly to the House of Commons, is there'll be points of tension in this. I would have preferred to have the points of tension rather earlier over different issues, that's well known.
But you said there'll be no downside to Brexit, only a considerable upside.
Well, there will be considerable upsides. You talked about it as a generational thing. It certainly is. You've got Liam Fox coming on later. He's dealing with the upsides, the huge opportunities. He'll no doubt tell you about where he's been this summer. You know, I think
he will.
Yeah, well, you should ask him, because it's important. Because actually, even if we stayed inside the European Union, even if we stayed inside, by the middle of the next decade, 2/3 of our business will be the rest of the world, 1/3 with the European Union. That's the way it's going. And what this is about is facilitating that. And I said all along, there'll be technical and tactical problems, and there'll be pressure points. And we'll have to live through the pressure points. We have to see the other side off in some respects. Yeah.
Were you ever really the Brexit secretary?
Yes, I was always the Brexit secretary. The question is whether I controlled events. That's another matter.
Another way of putting it is, was Ollie Robbins and Number 10 really always interfering, always in charge?
I want to be careful. I mean, Ollie Robbins was also my permanent secretary for a while, and he's a patriotic man. He wants to get the best for Britain. We have different views on what that is. But the issue at the end of the day is what the Prime Minister wants. When I was appointed, the Prime Minister quite properly said to me, I, the Prime Minister, will be leading the negotiation. You will be supporting me. That's the way she put it. What happened, the reason I left after Chequers, was we got to a point where her view, advised by Ollie, but not just by Ollie, advised by many others, was different from mine.
Do you think that Theresa May really believes that Brexit will be a good thing for Britain?
I think so. I mean,
you can't answer the question, apparently.
Well, I think so. I mean, through all our discussions, I mean, up until the last month or two, through all our discussions, I mean, there would be points of difference we had, which it was my job to resolve. That's partly what I was there for, to find the match, find the compromise. But you know, I was quite clear in my mind that she saw this as an opportunity to be grasped. My disappointment about Chequers is it actually denies us a large part of that opportunity.
Number 10 Central seems to think that Dominic Raab is a better Brexit secretary. He spent 6 hours face-to-face with Mr Barnier on Friday. In the first half of the year, you spent only 4 hours face-to-face.
Yeah, well, that's because we've now got a policy to work with. I mean, bear in mind, the first half of the year, we've been battling very hard to decide what the outcome would be.
So what were you doing in all that time?
Having the battles to get that result. But you're right, Dominic Raab is a good Brexit secretary. He was my choice, as it were. Well, not my choice, it's her choice, but my preferred option for following on from me. He'll be very good Brexit secretary. He'll do the best he can on the Chequers deal. But unfortunately, the Chequers deal is not one which is going to be good enough for the UK.
For most of us, the summer's a time to do some reading, so I'm going to read you something that I read in the summer. If a democracy cannot change its mind, it ceases to be a democracy. We should not ask people to vote on a blank sheet of paper and tell them to trust us to fill in the details afterwards. Referendums should be held when people know exactly what they're getting. David Davis, some years ago. Are you going to announce your support for the people's vote?
No, certainly not. Let me tell you why not. I mean, the point about referenda is that they are once in a generation. The other thing that you didn't read out of that is that they are once in a generation things. You don't do them all the time. Now, we had an argument lasting a year or more over whether we should leave or stay, and the British public came to its judgment. You know, and it's a very smart public, the British public. They can see through people's stories that don't stand up and so on, and they made their decision. Now, if we tried to have another referendum immediately afterwards, what would the European Union do? They're already trying to make this a tough negotiation. They would give us the worst outcome possible in order to encourage that referendum to vote to stay in. That's why we don't need a referendum now.
David Davis, thanks for talking to us. We'll hear a lot more from you, I suspect, at the Tory party conference.